Previously, adapting the Wizard of Oz book by L. Frank Borum was no short of an easy task. Or not. Some say that Trudy Garland was treated like shit by the studio and her mother. But the studio heads at MGM questioned if it was still worthy to continue. They were also thinking of just shutting down production altogether. But the producer, Mervyn LeRoy, convinced everyone at MGM to continue the movie. But this was only the beginning of this nightmare. They still had a long yellow brick road ahead of them. We're not quite done. And in today's second part story, we're going to take a look at the many injuries that happen on set and many creative clashes with the studio and the director. This is The Complicated History of the Wizard of Oz, Part 2. Chapter 6, Completing the Mess. With a new director, George Cukor, he really changed things, but only a week later, he had to work on Gone with the Wind. So, to fill in the shoes, Victor Fleming was brought on board and filming continued. Immediately when Fleming entered, they had problems. Once again. For example, when shooting all of the Tin Man scenes, they accidentally filmed all of his scenes with the shiny suit, aka when Dorothy and Scarecrow meet him, he's shiny, not rusty, which might cause some filming issues that spend the crew a couple of $1,000s. It's not that bad. But another problem happened with the lighting because they wanted to shoot all of the scenes in Oz with 3 strip Technicolor cameras. They had to use massive lights, sometimes from what's available, and sometimes they just steal from other people, aka they caused a couple of blackouts in a few cities, and the set itself was usually around 100 degrees, so they had to spend more money. So, the producers at MGM were left with one question. Do you continue the movie with all of its stuff? But Mervyn LeRoy, the producer, always had to make sure that they wouldn't cancel the movie. Multiple times. But yet, there were still more problems with the movie. Chapter 7. Problem After Problem. Getting towards the finish line was rough. Many of the famous incidents of the movie happened around this time. So, to save time, I will talk about them right here, right now. Margaret Hamilton, aka the Wicked Witch of the West, was filming her disappearance from Munchenland that needed a trap door and a fire. But on one of the takes, the fire went a little bit early, leaving her some scars on her face and right arm, leaving her in the hospital for a few days. But when she returned, she was asked if she wanted to do a stunt with smoke, and she said no. So they had to hire a stunt double, but on one take, the smoke machine that they used blew up and damaged the stunt double so bad that they had to get a goddamn hysterectomy. Which, if you don't know, because most of my audiences is teenagers, you can't have children. Other small mentions include 2 flying monkeys fell because their cable was snapped, a choreographer was drunk and fell into a trap door, landing on top of someone, and Terry the Terrier, the dog that played Toto, had to recover because some random extra stepped on her back. But one of the most infamous was during the poppy flower scene, because the fake snow that was covered on them, it basically gave everyone pure asbestos. Or was it Crispon? I don't know. But those two somehow lead directly into cancer. Yeah, but that was like before everyone knew that it was bad. But in pure American way, they did not care. And reminder, most of these events happened near each other, but filming finally wrapped in March of 1939. Chapter 8: Post-Production Problems. When entering post-production, Victor Fleming was let go because George Cukor really messed up Gone with the Wind, and Victor had to save another movie, leaving directing duties to King Vidor, which shockingly they did not know, because Fleming was the only person known as the director, and King Vidor was only in the post-production and wasn't even noticed until he died. So, yeah. During post-production, there were mainly two groups. One group had to do reshoots until June. The other one had to do months of sound work, like re-recording dialogue that didn't fit, making sure that the Tin Man metal sounds led up to the music, perfecting a tornado before CGI, and the usual studio interference. You know, all those. And because MGM wanted to be because MGM wanted the movie to be under 2 hours, multiple song reprises like Ding Dong the Witch is Dead and Somewhere Under the Rainbow was cut, and even an entire song called The Jitterbug, because I guess it wouldn't even make sense, would it? But during one test screening, MGM cut the song Over the Rainbow because they didn't want to stay in Kansas for too long. But Mervyn Roy once again had to make sure it stayed in the picture, where he succeeded. And finally, after a long journey, the movie was completed. Chapter 9: The Release. The Wizard of Oz premiered at the Opium Theater in Green Bay, Wisconsin on August 10th, 1939, and would eventually go across the United States on August 25th, 1939. Despite the wonderful reviews, the budget was $2.8 million, and it only made $3 million, so that's not enough to make Bad Kid's budget. During awards season, it tried its best, but it only got a few wins, mainly because it was overshadowed by Gone with the Wind, directed by Victor Fleming. You know, the guy that saved The Wizard of Oz. That. You know, that. And also because another major key point of its failed box office, it just so happened that World War II was starting, and some of the international markets had to close. Then after the war, and some re-releases later, it made $27 million by 1955. And then around the 1950s, it was entering obscurity, and people thought, oh, it's gonna be that movie. However, one event would change the reputation of the movie. Chapter 10: A Second Chance. On November 3rd, 1956, CBS bought the rights to show it on television from MGM, and during that broadcast, it had 45 million people tune in, and it was a massive success. So they replayed it a few years later, and then some years after that, and then eventually it became an annual tradition to play the film on television during the holiday season. And with more love to the movie, it became one of the greatest of old classic cinema, with many more adaptations, sometimes changing the story, but still having that wonder and charm, or it can still just be the same story. And as time moves on and the world gets a little bit more crazy, The Wizard of Oz will always be remembered for having the most infamous production and still having its wonder and charm. Moral of the story: Things just take some time.